And we continue at 2:06 in the afternoon. Talk Radio 790 KABC, the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wangs in Culver City.
John, later on in that LA City Council meeting, Eunice Hernandez got real pissed at Tracy Park.
I take great offense to what was just said by Councilmember Park because my heart aches for the loss that happened in Palisades, both the lives and the property. And when the motions came out to support your region, no question, threw down and supported what you put forth.
She threw down for you, Tracy.
How dare you not return the favor?
Quite frankly.
800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. Well, a lot of people are talking about the process of rebuilding the Palisades. What is that going to look like? How long is that going to take? Are homeowners going to be made whole? And right now, no one is really giving homeowners consistent answers. You start out with the removal of all of the debris. They were all initially told that that would take 18 months. And then later on in the day, when it was clear that President Trump didn't think that answer was acceptable, that's when the mayor started to go, humana, 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 we'll make it faster. Well, how long is faster? Well, it's faster. And then it seems like there have been a variety of numbers that have been thrown out as potential deadlines, or I guess I should say marks on the calendar, something they're shooting for, so that the debris will be gone and people can start the process of rebuilding. But at no point have I heard a number that everyone seems to agree on, and homeowners can use it for planning purposes. If your home burned down in the fire and you're being told 15 different numbers in terms of when you can start the process of rebuilding, you have no clue when you're going to move back into your home. You just don't. And what you need more than anything is an accurate number. If it's a bad number, then fine. You can figure out just exactly how you want to play that hand of cards. If it's a good number, well, okay, that's the best case scenario. You can start the process of rebuilding your life as quickly as possible. But having a changing number or a nebulous number, that doesn't do you any good. And then when they come out and say that they're going to change the zoning and they're going to require low-income housing to be put up in the Palisades, and they're going to want things to be done in an environmentally friendly sort of way, well, how can you say you don't need permits to go back and rebuild what you used to have, and then say, but we're changing all of the environmental regulations, and you now have to follow this new list? You know how they enforce the list. They enforce the list by requiring you to get permits and proving that you're in compliance with the list. That's not getting rid of the red tape. That's the definition of red tape. And it's not only red tape, but it's different and new from what existed before. I understand that there are people who will try to take advantage of this, where if your home burned down and you say, okay, I had a home that was this size, now I want to add another story, and now I want to turn it into a McMansion, and then I'm going to turn around and flip it, so I'm going to try to make money off of this deal. I feel sorry for that person for having their home burned down, and I understand the impulse of doing that. But if you're the city and you just want people to be able to rebuild what they had before, I understand if you don't want them to do that. And then the neighbors go nuts because the second story blocks the view, and you know how that goes. But if all of a sudden you now have the government saying, well, wait a minute, what you had before is not compliant with what we require now, and we want this to be a green build, so we want you to build it in a totally different way from what you had before, they're not being honest with what they're saying. They don't want you to be able to make yourself whole and have what you had before. They want you to build something totally different. And then if you start to require low-income housing up there, you are going to entirely change the character of that neighborhood. You know how that works. Whether it's through zoning or other means, the moment you go from being single-family homes to being apartment buildings or condos or whatever, that's a different stress on parking. That's a different stress on sewage. That's a different stress on transportation. That's how that works.
And don't forget, the traffic on those streets was already so bad that people started abandoning their cars when the fire started. So more density in that area doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense.
And density is exactly what they want. Go back to what they were trying to do in the San Fernando Valley. You remember this one, Randy, where in a single-family home, I think this was in Nithya Raman's district, they gave a developer the ability to build essentially, it's not a high-rise, but it's a building that's not a single-family home, and it certainly had many stories to it so that people could live in an apartment-style living.
It was in a cul-de-sac single-family neighborhood in Sherman Oaks and Nithya Raman's district where, thanks to Karen Bass's original executive orders for the homelessness crisis to cut the red tape and speed up housing, a developer was able to buy a single-family home and get approvals to turn it into a 7-story building.
So if that's what they're going to do there, it's going to totally change the Palisades. And you have to pay very close attention to what they're saying. They're saying we're going to make our changes with input from the people who own property in the Palisades. Okay, if your home just burned down and you sell your property to a developer, that developer is now a stakeholder in the Palisades. So suddenly listening to that person and paying attention to that person is just as important, if not more important, than the homeowners whose homes burned down in the fire.
Well, and anybody that sells their land because they don't want to deal with all this, whoever buys that land because of state laws can turn any single-family home into a fourplex overnight. The zoning is already changed for that.
And I'm not alleging any kind of conspiracy where they let the fire burn it down on purpose so they could change it, but they certainly want to change the way we live in California. They do not want you living in a single-family home. They do not want you with a pool and a yard. They do not want you driving your own car. They want you living above a Panda Express. They want you riding their murder trains. And they don't want you to have any kind of outdoor space. They want you to go hang out in the park with all the homeless people and the needles. That's good enough for them. And the fact of the matter is that's just not how we want to live here. If you were to live in a great big concrete jungle, there are places that are set up for that. Much better than here. Go live in New York. They cater to people who like that kind of living. Go live in Philadelphia. Go live in Boston.
Go live in San Francisco. It's gorgeous.
Those cities are, generally speaking, not big geographically, but they're built vertically. And so there's a grid, and subways make sense in places like New York. You can get around easily, and it's not that big, so you could walk if you need to walk somewhere. And it works out just fine for people who like that kind of living. Southern California and Los Angeles were not built vertically. Yes, there are portions that are. Downtown LA is, Santa Monica is, but for the most part, that's not how we're built. We are built horizontally. People have very different patterns. It's not the man in the gray flannel suit where everyone lives in Long Island and commutes into the city at 8 o'clock in the morning and they go home at 5 having 2 martinis on the way home. That's just not how modern life operates anymore. You might live in Claremont and work in Huntington Beach, and you might start at 11 a.m. and get home at 8 p.m. It's not the way it used to work in the 1950s. And Southern California will never be New York City. It just won't. They can hope, they can wish, they can pray. We're just too big for that to work. You are never going to come up with a public transportation grid that will be as efficient as the one that they have in New York or Boston or Philadelphia. It's just not going to happen.
Even by the time they actually got everything they're planning to build built, it'll be obsolete with the robocars.
And I've got to tell you, if I was a homeowner in the Pacific Palisades and my home burned down in the fire, all of this would just add to my anxiety. Because imagine if you put up with all of the BS that you're going to have to put up with to go through the process of rebuilding, and then you go back to a neighborhood that in no way resembles what you used to live in. It's going to be a massive waste of time.
At what point do you say, I'm moving to Orange County or I'm moving somewhere else?
I think that's what a lot of them are going to do. Because I think what the city is doing is they're sending the signal that they want a complete turnover in that area. They want the old crowd gone and they want a new crowd in. And if they bring in a new crowd, the new crowd is not going to want what Pacific Palisades used to offer. They're going to want something totally different. So you can build it in ways that make the new crowd happy, assuming that the old crowd isn't going to come back. I think that's the working assumption.
Oh, and you already have. We've actually seen dozens of families that have already relocated specifically to Newport Beach, and Newport Beach has the welcome wagon ready to go. I think over 200 kids who were in Palisades schools are now enrolled in Newport Beach schools.
And Newport Beach, independent municipality, very well run, Orange County. A lot of those people are going to like what they see in Newport Beach, and they're not going to want to go back. If you're of retirement age, I really don't think any of those people are going back. If you're going to go back to the Pacific Palisades and you're going to rebuild, I don't even really know what population you're talking about. Because if you have kids that are school age, they're going to go to new schools, they're going to find new friends, they're going to become members of new athletic teams, they're going to have new teachers, and they're going to get settled in. And if you go to a place like Newport Beach, they're going to like it. So I don't think those people are going back. If you're a retiree, why in the world would you sign up for potentially 5 years of dealing with headaches to rebuild, to live in a neighborhood that's not going to be what you left behind, what you formerly used to have? I don't see those people doing it. So maybe if you split your time between Pacific Palisades and some other place, and you like the views, or you like the proximity to the airport, or you like the proximity to whatever it is that you do, maybe those people will go back. But if you were there full time, I don't see those people sticking around. I really don't. And then when you look at what led to the fire being as destructive as it was, it's basically the failure of Los Angeles city government. No, I do not blame them for the fire. No, I do not blame them for the wind. We've had fire, we've had wind since the beginning of time in Southern California. So it would be unreasonable to blame them for that. What I do blame them for is emptying the reservoir and not telling the fire department. There's no excuse for that. There's no excuse for cutting the budget for the fire department. If you are of the belief that global warming is going to kill us all, then isn't that the thing that would get funded the first? Wouldn't you prioritize fire and brush clearance and those sorts of things and water?
Well, and if you take Kenneth Mejia, the controller's position on this, the problem was that they defunded pretty much every department so they could pay for police raises to retain police officers because we've got a massive staffing shortage. But that's not the real story here. Where is all the money gone, especially since Karen Bass made it her number one priority? Karen Bass has bankrupted the city of Los Angeles, and all to solve the homeless problem, which she has not solved.
That's right. Those crooked organizations that exist to keep homelessness going are bankrupting the city. We are bringing the Brinks truck over to those organizations because it makes everyone feel good. Karen Bass can say that homelessness is her top priority, and she is focusing her time, her efforts, her allocation of resources based on ending homelessness. But she's not. If those organizations were working and the number of people living on the streets was going down and not up, then you could make the case for spending an obscene amount of money on the homeless. But if you spend an obscene amount of money on the homeless and the problem only gets worse and not better, what the hell are you doing?
And sure, Karen Bass loved to tout that in her first year, the homeless number went down by 10% in the city. But the number went down by only 200 in the county, which is a rounding error, which means the number really did not go down.
And all of this goes back to, and it's not just Karen Bass, Gavin Newsom is just as bad as her. What they do is the metric of success that they use for fill-in-the-blank problem is the number of dollars they spend, the number of people that they hire, and the number of programs that they create. Whether or not any of that is actually working to solve the problem is not relevant to them. If they're spending money on it, that's success. Well, it's not a zero-sum game. There's not unlimited amounts of money. If you're the mayor or you're the governor, you don't set monetary policy in the country. You can't just print money. You have to take it from someplace else. And what she did was she took money from fire and she spent it on the homeless. The people who were starting the fires. That's where she spent it. And then when the fire department doesn't have the resources they need to adequately respond to a fire, well, how could we have predicted the future? It's part of the reason why so many people who used to live in Pacific Palisades and are relocating to Newport Beach are going to like it. Because they don't have that kind of insanity there. The moment you cross that city line, the moment you go into Orange County, life is different. They prioritize different things. When you call 911, they show up. When you need water from the fire hydrants, it's there. And you just take it for granted. But not in L.A. Nothing works in L.A. And nothing is going to work in L.A. with these people in charge. And it's not even that bad all over L.A. County. You go into independent municipalities in L.A. County, and it's fine. Burbank is fine. You go into the South Bay, Manhattan Beach, they're well run. Hermosa Beach, they're well run. Redondo Beach, they're okay.
Santa Monica's not.
No. Although at least they try. We had that mayor on of Santa Monica, and he was doing the best he can.
Now they got a new mayor. It's not looking so good.
Well, that was fun while it lasted. But I'm telling you, government matters. And you see it at the local level in ways that you don't see it at other levels. Because competence matters most. And this is part of the problem when everything becomes a partisan election. Is you are elected to government based on what your position on abortion is or how much you hate Donald Trump. And whether or not you're capable of doing the job, it's just not relevant. Well, okay, if that's not relevant, don't get mad when there's no water in the fire hydrant. Because that's not why you hired them. It's like with Barbara Ferrer. People went nuts over her handling of COVID. That's not why they hired her. It never occurred to them that there would be a pandemic. They hired her to be a social justice warrior and write think pieces about how racist Whole Foods is for not having any locations next to the Coliseum. That's why they hired her. And then when the pandemic hit and she became in charge of something important, well, we can't dump her because then we'll look bad. But I'm telling you, right around now is when you should start to feel optimistic for these people, these homeowners who lost everything. Because you made it out alive, you got your health, okay, you experienced property damage, maybe even a complete rebuild, but you've got your health, and think about all the possibilities of the future. Count your lucky stars. But then you look at how the city is handling this, and you just say to yourself, oh my God, they are going to re-victimize these people over and over and over again. And if there's not just strings, but rope attached to the federal dollars that come in here, they're not going to see any of that money either. That money is going to go to other places. And I'm sure the homeless groups, the crooked homeless groups, will get their portion as well. Would be par for the course. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, with the end of the show quickly approaching, if you want to continue listening to us after we sign off at 3, that's easy to do.
All you got to do is go to KABC.com, click on podcasts, go to the Apple Podcast app, iHeart, Spotify, search for The John Phillips Show, hit subscribe. You can download all the episodes. You do a Google on the YouTube or get that handy-dandy KABC app. Search KABC AM in the Apple App Store, the Android Store. It's the easiest way to listen live to this radio station and download all the podcasts. You can catch up on all the latest news coming out of Vallejo.
Somebody robbed our school.
And coming up next week, we're going to Orange County like apparently everyone else.
How exciting is this? We are going to be in Santa Ana a week from tomorrow. Come see Johnny and I broadcast live from noon to 3, Friday the 7th at Rove Santa Ana. Rove Santa Ana is a full-service EV charging station with 40 ultra-fast EV chargers, a 24/7 lounge with restrooms and free Wi-Fi, a car wash, and a premium convenience store, Recharge by Gelson's. We're going to have free samples from vendors and barbecuing coming on, so come hungry as we broadcast live. Plenty of parking for non-EVs as well, of course. Rove and Recharge by Gelson's are located at 1008 East 17th Street in Santa Ana, off the 5 at the corner of East 17th and Lincoln. We'll see you live Friday the 7th.
Well, as many of you know, in addition to doing this, I'm also a columnist for the Southern California News Group, which includes the LA Daily News, the OC Register, the Riverside Press Enterprise, and most importantly, Randy,
the Redlands Daily Facts.
And this week I have a column out about LA Mayor Karen Bass and whether or not she will politically survive the fires and her anemic response to them. After my column was published, I was invited to discuss it on the news last night on Fox 11 with Alex Michelson. We have the sound of that interview for you. Let's go ahead and listen.
Move into the cleanup phase after the Palisades fire. New poll numbers show the majority of people do not approve the way that L.A. Mayor Karen Bass has handled the fires. Take a look. The Cypher AI poll shows that 54% of people surveyed disapprove of her job performance. Just 37% approve, 9% are unsure. We're a long way from the next mayoral election in 2026, but Bass not stacking up well against potential rival Rick Caruso, who of course she beat last time around. Right now, she's at 36% to his 43%. Don't know, doing pretty well as well. KBC Radio's John Phillips takes a stronger stand in his op-ed in the LA Daily News, saying that Democrat Bass' response to the fire is, quote, so pathetic that a highly partisan Democrats are starting to look for alternatives. John Phillips joins me now live. John, good to be with you. So your main point is that Karen Bass was really, really helped by the Democratic Party in her campaign for mayor. But where do you think the Democrats go from here?
Well, I think we have a race that was very similar to what happened between Rick Caruso and Karen Bass last time around. And that is with George Gascon, the district attorney, where he ran against Jackie Lacey and had the Democratic Party firmly in his corner. Adam Schiff endorsed him, Laura Friedman, then Mayor Eric Garcetti. And it was enough for him, along with the Democratic Party, to beat an incumbent. He then became the district attorney. He was very soft on crime. His record was totally outrageous. And even with the Democratic Party behind him, when he ran for re-election, his performance was so bad, it cut through the noise to the point to where Democratic voters, which is basically what you're talking about when you're talking about city of LA elections, they outnumber Republicans by wide margins. They ended up turning on him and getting behind Nathan Hochman, a declined state candidate who was a former Republican and tough on crime. Karen Bass is entering that George Gascon territory at this point, and this new poll reflects essentially that sentiment. And it may not matter that the Democratic Party is behind her or that some of the elected officials who are bold-faced names have technically endorsed her. Her performance is so abysmal in this particular case with these fires that I think that Democratic voters would be willing to turn on her and find an alternative, with Rick Caruso in this poll besting her by, 7 points.
Yeah, well, Democratic, she's not in as bad a position as Gascon was, but we'll see where we go. But what we saw with Gascon was all of the Democratic officials that had endorsed him then were quiet and not really around the second time around in terms of being near him. We have not seen Governor Newsom and Mayor Bass do a press conference together, which may or may not be a coincidence, but I think it's probably not, which may give you an indication in terms of where he thinks the politics of all this is. And then you mentioned Caruso. There's some people that are speculating whether Caruso might run for governor, run for his job. Where do you think Caruso goes? Because it certainly seems like he's running for something.
Yeah, he's acting a whole lot like a candidate. There's certainly, I think, room in the field for governor for other names, particularly those who either have high name ID or they have a lot of money. Rick Caruso has both. He just spent a lot of money to become very well known in Los Angeles, the largest city in the state. So I could very easily see him running for statewide office. Now, that being said, he's taken much more of an interest in Los Angeles issues than statewide issues. So if he's going to run for governor, he's going to have to expand his portfolio and start talking about other subjects that involve people other than people who live in Los Angeles. But going back to that re-election bid that Karen Bass is prepared to make for mayor of LA, she's not only going to get hit from the right by Rick Caruso, but it's very possible that there could be a candidate who jumps in and hits her from the left, and that candidate could be the city controller, Kenneth Mejia, who's a DSA member, Democratic Socialists of America. And if she's taking incoming fire from the right and the left, that's going to make her very vulnerable as she seeks another term.
Yeah, and in terms of the Caruso thing, it seemed like he was preparing to run for governor because he and his team did not think that there was a path for him to win as L.A. mayor, because they thought that the polls showed that Karen Bass had that locked up. But now we're in a very different world. That was before the fires, so it'll be interesting to see what happens there. John Phillips, you can read his op-ed in the Daily News, and of course you can listen to him on the John Phillips Show weekdays on KABC Radio right here in Los Angeles. Thanks so much, John.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so that was Fox 11 last night. Thank you to Alex Michelson and all the good people over at Fox for having me on. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, you're monitoring the mailbag.
We got an email here from Paul in Orange County. Paul writes in and says, hate to say it, but the state government is driving crazy development here as well. For example, they're requiring the addition of 13,000 additional dwellings here in Fullerton without consideration of the citizens already here, or they got to face fines. I think the state government is the problem.
A case could be made.
Well, one of the things that Gavin did with he likes to call it RENA, but it's these housing goals that he puts for every single city and every single county. And if you don't promise to build as much housing as Gavin says you have to build, what the state does is they take away the local municipality's ability to zone anything, and they'll just overrule you.
Command and control from the state of California.